Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk Podcast. A huge week in the world of sports around the entire globe as we have new European champions, new South American champions. The Gold Cup in North America has started. The Tampa Bay Lightning officially crowned Stanley Cup champions. And then, of course, the NBA Finals are also well and truly underway. So much to talk about in the world of sports. And as always, I have Jacob here joined with me to talk all about it. Jacob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Just living life. I go back to work on Friday, so that's a good positive sign. We're making in the right direction.
There you go. In a couple of days, Ontario will be like everyone else and will be allowed to eat indoors again. Wow,
Shocker! What a
huge,
shocker!
huge steps being taken. But no, let's get right into it and let's talk about the match that I think has been the talk of the entire world probably over the last 24 hours, and that is Italy are crowned European champions after defeating England at Wembley Stadium in London 3-2 on penalties after the match finished 1-1 after extra time. And I mean, I think there's a couple of really key storylines here, but obviously the number one storyline is the decisions that Gareth Southgate, the England manager, made, particularly with some late substitutions and who he decided to have step up and take the penalties, putting his faith in a couple of very young and inexperienced players. A lot of people have been critical of Southgate and also critical of some other players on England for not volunteering to take those penalties and instead, putting all of that pressure on some of their younger players. Jacob, what were your thoughts on the game and your thoughts on the controversy, or not the controversy, but the poor decision making that's being accused towards the English manager?
Yeah, well, I thought the game was pretty well balanced. England seemed to control a lot of that first half, scoring within the second minute of the game, so off to a strong start. And then Italy kind of controlled the second half of the game, and honestly, I would argue they even controlled that extra time, the extra 30 minutes that you get. Um, you know, it's a learning curve, I think, to say. Obviously, I think Southgate made some very critical mistakes putting in the young guys. Like Sancho hadn't played like more than like a game, so that's a big problem. And you had the 19-year-old. I can't remember his name right now, who's being racially profiled now and there's some really nasty things being said about him. He's 19 years old, and he's not going to be. This isn't going to be his legacy. One penalty shot. Um, but it's penalty shots. It's a game of guessing and a game of shooters usually win those with more luck than others. But the Italian goaltender was better, and honestly, the game was England's to lose, and they lost it. They were at home, they had everything going for them, and they just couldn't get it done.
Yeah, no, I really do agree with you. I think that obviously England started great. They scored in the second minute. Um, and I think after once England went up 1-0, I think you could tell that the Italian players were a bit shocked. And England for the first 15 minutes, I think, were absolutely all over Italy and were dominant. But I think that it took about 10 minutes after England scored that goal for Italy to recover and get back to their normal game. And I think from about the 15th, 20th minute onwards, Italy were pretty much in control of the game, and they started to take back more and more of the initiative in that game and really started to become the better team. And I think that was evident from everybody. And I think you made a great point when you talk about Sancho barely got any playing time. And so I think it's really crazy how, people have been calling, fans, analysts, everybody has been calling for guys like Sancho and Rashford to play more and to be involved more throughout the whole tournament, and they weren't. But now you're talking about the penalty shootout in the finals, which is the most pressure-packed moment, and you're talking about Southgate, the coach, didn't trust these players to play the entire tournament, but now he suddenly trusts them to come on and take the penalty shootout. Like, that just sounds super hypocritical to me. Like, if you trust Sancho to come on and take a penalty shootout in the finals, then surely you trust him enough to have been playing him the entire time. But he wasn't. So that's what I found really shocking. Like, Rashford has hit some key penalties for Manchester United, some crucial penalties for Manchester United. I honestly thought it was a smart idea getting him on to take the penalty. And I mean, if he has faith in Jadon Sancho and wants to let him take the penalty, I think that's fair enough. But the problem with that is he subbed them on right at the end of the game. They weren't warmed up. They didn't have any time to get ready. Basically, the first touch of the ball that they had was kicking that penalty. You're putting your players you're setting up your players for failure, and that falls on the coach. That doesn't fall on the player. Like, the player doesn't decide when he gets into the game. If you want these players to take a penalty, give them at least 5-10 minutes of game time so that they can get settled into the game. They can get a touch of the ball so that they're ready. And then the player's name, Bukayo Saka, was the guy who took the fifth penalty. I thought he had a phenomenal tournament. I was actually surprised that Southgate was playing him ahead of the likes of Jack Grealish, for example, or Jadon Sancho or Marcus Rashford. But I thought he had a tremendous tournament. And this is another example of this is the biggest penalty. This is the biggest moment in English soccer for 55 years. And I give Saka tremendous credit for having the balls to step up and shoot, because I would not, in that situation, I would say, no, I'm not taking a penalty. Like, I missed penalties in high school soccer. Like, I missed a penalty in high school soccer when I was in grade 10, and I was afraid to take another penalty in high school soccer. So I can only imagine the confidence he has in himself to say, I'm going up and taking this penalty. Obviously, it sucks that he missed it, and I mean, I think it goes without saying that no one should be throwing any sort of abuse at this guy, especially racial abuse. Like, that just, like, the guy missed a penalty. There are bigger, more important things in life than that. But the point is you as a coach, you can't be setting your players up for failure, and that's what he did by not giving Rashford and Sancho enough time to get warmed up, and then by throwing a 19-year-old kid in the most pressure-packed situation in his life. And oh, by the way, Bukayo Saka has never taken a penalty in his professional career before. Maybe choose someone who's taken a penalty before, right? And so ultimately, I think it falls on poor management.
Well, yeah, you're right. They had barely touched the pitch in the entire tournament. Then all of a sudden, you're asking them to, like you said, step on the biggest probably kick of their lives in the biggest moment of their career, and obviously in front of all those fans. Like, it's nerve wracking. And so imagine, like, his nerves, especially after all the racist hate he's been getting after, which is absolutely disgusting for sure. It's embarrassing too. Not all, like, this doesn't define us English fans. This is obviously a few bad nuts in the entire case, but um, it was very poor management, and Southgate had kept Sancho off. I don't know why. Also, it didn't help that Rashford hit the post, like, in the penalty shootout when he had beat the goalie. That obviously doesn't help a lot. Um, but it was, it was whatever. Good job to Italy. They deserved it. They, like you said, they dominated most of that second half. Like you said, from like the 15th minute on, like, they were owning it. They deserved the win. So good for them.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about Italy, they played phenomenal all tournament long. And when you look at that final, really, when I watched the game, Italy to me looked like a team that went out trying to win. England went out, looked like a team that were trying not to lose, especially going up 1-0 in the second minute. I think after that, England really sat back and really tried to defend for 118 minutes, basically, to keep it 1-0. And then obviously Italy, the goal that Italy scored was not a good goal at all. It was just a scramble off of a corner kick. But, that happens in sports all the time. You can be a good defensive team. And England, once again, they were tremendous all tournament. They only allowed 2 goals against all tournament. So I'm not saying that their defensive style didn't work, because, I mean, it got them to the final. They only gave up 2 goals. But the reality of the situation is, no matter how good defensively you are, a bad bounce here, a scramble in the box there, and all of a sudden it's in the back of your net. And then I don't think England showed enough going forward to really look like they were trying to take initiative of the game. And I know last week I mentioned being the home team is worth a half a goal. England playing at London in Wembley, they needed to show more positive play. They needed to show more attacking play. They needed to take the game like they needed to grab hold of the game, and they didn't. They let Italy grow into the game, and they let Italy become the more dominant team. And now, granted, Italy were the best team all tournament. They were doing that against every opponent that they played. But I was really disappointed that that's the game plan that England really decided to choose. And the last thing I will say is, I mean, you talk about trusting the players in the game, and I did as well. I mean, Raheem Sterling had a phenomenal tournament, all tournament for England. He was one of their best players. Why wasn't he taking a penalty? Jordan Henderson got subbed on into the game. He's the captain for Liverpool. He's won Champions Leagues. He's won Premier Leagues with Liverpool. He's a natural-born leader. And the whole thing about Jordan Henderson is, oh, well, he's not the best technical player, but he shows up in the big moments. He's a leader. Isn't that the type of guy that you want taking your penalty? Like, the fact that Raheem Sterling, who was arguably the best player all tournament, and Jordan Henderson, who's like the de facto captain of the team, like one of the big leaders of the team, the fact that those two guys, well, the fact that Southgate subbed off Henderson and didn't even let him get a chance to take the penalty is disgraceful. And honestly, I'm shocked that Raheem Sterling didn't take it upon himself to say, no, I'm taking this penalty.
Well,
And now I know, sorry, go ahead.
personally, watching Sterling in the semis and the finals, I wasn't very impressed with his play. I don't know. I don't think he was like good at. He just wasn't up to the level of standard that he's been shown to play at. So I
No,
think
that's
maybe.
fair. That's fair. You're right. In the semis and the final, I think he got tired because he was leaned upon a lot. But you're right. In the semis and the finals, he did
But
not play up to the way that he had been playing for the rest of the tournament. No,
But
that's a fair
you
point.
look at their captain Kane, and he seemed like the only one who was comfortable out there. Like he scored the penalty pretty comfortably, and he looked like he was putting his heart into every single play he made. Like Sterling, I think just had his confidence shattered, and once and we say this in a lot of sports, is it's really hard to get your confidence back. So I can see how Southgate didn't want to put Sterling out there with his confidence like that, the way he was playing. But I agree in the sense that um, maybe yeah, Sterling was called a lot, especially because of the resume he has. So maybe that added a little pressure to his game.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing is, um, well, Sterling didn't have the best season this year with Man City, but Southgate was adamant going into the first game of the tournament that Sterling was a starter, and he kept with Sterling as a starter the entire tournament. Sterling basically played the entire tournament. So if you've trusted him to play this entire tournament, surely you trust him to take this penalty. Now, I can see what you're saying in terms of, obviously he wasn't having the best finals or even the best semifinals, so maybe he was like a little bit low on confidence. But you're talking about a guy who scored 3-4 goals this tournament, and you look at who stepped up and to take the penalties. Harry Kane, captain of Tottenham, goal scorer. Harry Maguire, he's a center back, but he's the captain of Manchester United, and he stepped up, and that was a phenomenal penalty. He didn't look like a center back taking that penalty. Marcus Rashford, he's one of the young leaders of Manchester United, one of the young leaders of England. That was a penalty that I thought made a lot of sense. It's unfortunate that he hit the post. He sent the goalkeeper the wrong way. It was a great penalty if he had just, found a way to hit the post. Or sorry, not hit the post. So those first three penalty takers, I think, they make so much sense. And I really thought that Raheem Sterling and Jordan Henderson would have been the last two penalty takers. I mean, Sancho, I understand, but he's 21 years old, and you haven't played him a lot all tournament. So, I mean, if you're really not setting him up for a lot of success. But anyways, outside of that, what are your overall takeaways with the tournament as a whole?
Well, England fans should be disgraced by the way they're reacting, but because England's got a bright future. The World Cup is next year, and I think these guys will be back, and they're gonna want blood. They're gonna want that extra. They're not gonna miss those penalty shots, or they're gonna make those extra plays. So be careful of England, but the fans should be kind of disgraced themselves right now.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. The response has been terrible. I mean, there were also apparently there were England fans trying to like force their way into the stadium without tickets, and it was
Yeah,
just a whole lot of madness going on, and obviously that type of shit just that's just like that's well, don't do
it
that.
it really makes it really looks really bad on the game, and it looks bad for England. Although they I know they didn't tell the fans to do that and say all that shit, but like you're right. It's disgraceful, and it's just not acceptable in any kind of sport whatsoever.
No, absolutely. And like you said, it definitely is like a smaller proportion of fans, but when they're that vocal and when they're causing that level of attention, it doesn't look that way, and it does look very bad. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think England do definitely have a bright future. Some overall takeaways of the tournament: France is going to have some big questions going into the next tournament. Obviously, a huge disappointment this tournament, and they decided to stick with Didier Deschamps as their coach. But rumors are now Zinedine Zidane, the only job he wants is the French job. And when you're Zinedine Zidane, you're going to get what you want, especially because the fans have really been backing him. And so Deschamps is really under a lot of fire with this French team. It's going to be very interesting to see how that situation unfolds going forward.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think that it's really it's really not hard to disagree with that. France has got a lot of big question marks going around them, so we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, and now speaking of champions, uh, Lionel Messi is a champion with Argentina, and that feels so good to say. So, as we said, Italy crowned champions of Europe, while Argentina are crowned champions of South America. They win the Copa America. They beat Brazil 1-0 in the final in Brazil. Sensing a pattern here of teams losing in the finals at home. Angel Di Maria with the goal in the 1-0 game. Jacob, I don't know if you watched the game, but I really hope that the viewers did. If you watched the Euro final compared to the Copa America final, was so much better. It was a phenomenal game of soccer. You could tell that the rivalry between Argentina and Brazil was there. You could tell that they did not like each other, and they were putting it all on the line to try to win. Argentina defended brilliantly, and you could just tell the passion that they had in that game. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, I actually did watch the game. It's like the one Copa America game I've watched, and Argentina just looked just outstanding. Like they just there's literally I don't even think there was anything wrong with their gameplay at all. They just they scored that goal and that was it. 1-0 final, and honestly, finally, like Messi finally gets that King of South America trophy. Like it's been so long. Like he's won everything except that, and it's so good to see him raise that above his head.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That game, honestly, it looked like a hockey game at times. I swear, with the like some of the fouls that were going on, like it was a full contact game of soccer. One of the Argentina players, Montiel, was bleeding from his like sock at the end of the game. And Rodrigo de Paul, one of the Argentine midfielders, was quoted leading into the tournament and during the tournament saying, I'm here to win it for Messi. I would go to war for Messi. And I think that was evident. Rodrigo de Paul was phenomenal in that final. He was everywhere. He set up the goal. He was just tracking runs, like laying his body on the line, sacrificing his body, the tackles, the blocks that he was putting in. And it was clear that this Argentine team was really rallied around, we need to win this for Messi. And they left it all out on the field. And that's why I'm really happy for Messi, obviously, because he deserves this, but for the Argentine team that was really able to deliver a win for their teammate.
Yeah, that's a team coming together. That's a team coming together and fighting for your captain for maybe one of his last chances at this, and that's what a team does is they rally around a guy, and they did it. They got the job done, and you can't stop but congratulate them for the job they've done. And Neymar showed some love to Messi after Neymar's obviously won it a few times, I think. I know once at least, but my point is, like, goat show respect to goat, and there's no one better out there than Messi. So, congratulations to him. It's long overdue.
Actually, surprisingly, I mean, Brazil won the last one in 2019, but Neymar was injured, so technically he has not won it, which is crazy to believe, but Brazil will be back. But like you said, that was still a great moment of two obviously former teammates, two friends, uh, you know, uh, embracing there afterwards and really showing the human side of the game as well. Of obviously Neymar being, despite being disappointed in losing the game, happy for Messi. It's the first time that Brazil have lost in the Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro since 1993, when they were beaten by Argentina back then, and they lose again in 2021. And so now my question for you, Jacob, is Messi with 4 goals, 5 assists, I believe it was in the tournament, top goal scorer, top assist, best player of the tournament, wins the title. So my question mark to you is, does this cement his legacy as the greatest player of all time?
Well, it's interesting because Ronaldo got the Golden Boot at the Euros too, so that people will still use that conversation as well. But I personally have always thought Messi's better than Ronaldo. He's more of a team player. He's overall his stats are just as par as him. He just seems like a better captain than Ronaldo does. Ronaldo seems like he really wants to just kind of score every game, while Messi just wants to win. Like Messi's didn't score in that game, but his reaction to them winning was just priceless. It was something that he's never done and he's wanted to his entire life. So I personally think Messi is the better player, and yes, it does concrete his legacy as one of the greatest, at least, if not the greatest, in Argentinian and soccer history, no doubt.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I think he was already the greatest of all time, but there is just this question mark of, oh, can he win it with Argentina? And now he has, and now I think that was the only thing that fans of other players could point to. If you're a Ronaldo fan, it was always, oh, Euro 2016. If you're, a little bit older and you're a Maradona fan, it was, oh, the 1986 World Cup, I believe, 84 the World Cup that Maradona won with Argentina back in the 80s. And it was always, well, what has Messi won for Argentina? Well, and now Messi has won something, and you can point to that. And yeah, Ronaldo did win the Golden Boot, but I mean, I don't honestly. We talked about it a couple weeks ago when Portugal got eliminated. I don't think Ronaldo played that well. Most of his goals were penalties and tap-ins. And I mean, I'm not trying to discredit him. He did score 5 goals. That is the most goals of the tournament. That's how you win the Golden Boot. But um, you know, it's the first time Ronaldo has won a Golden Boot at a tournament, believe it or not. And I was looking into this because I just imagined that they would both be all over this, but. If you do want to compare the two, Ronaldo, this is his first Golden Boot at a major tournament, and he's never won the best player at a tournament. I believe he won best young player at Euro 2004. I'm just going to quickly double check that as I keep talking. But Messi has now won a couple of times. He's been the best player at the Copa America. I believe this is the third time he's been given that honor. This is This is a Golden Boot for him, and he was also, remember, named best player of the World Cup in 2014 when Argentina made it all the way to the finals. And of course, Portugal have never made it that far in a World Cup with Ronaldo. So, I mean, I'm just saying, if you do technically want to go head to head, Messi has the better of Ronaldo now at international level. I think if you really want to go that far. I'm trying to look here. I don't actually think there was a young player of the tournament back in Euro 2004, and that I'm looking at it. But given that he was named to the team of the tournament, and he was at the time like 19 years old or however old he was, he definitely would have won it had it been an award. So I will give him that honor, even if it doesn't technically exist, to sort of level him up with Messi. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's pretty obvious now. Obviously, you can be a fan of Ronaldo, and Ronaldo's a tremendous player. He's definitely second after Messi for like the current era of players, and Messi and Ronaldo are both just on a whole nother level ahead of everyone else in the world right now. But I don't think you can argue, you can make a case for anyone other than Messi.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, a lot of people will argue that Ronaldo's better because he has more goals and that, but with this win, I think Messi's just given himself, because it shows Ronaldo can't carry his team, but Messi can. Like we saw that right now. Like Ronaldo couldn't win the Euros, but Messi won the Copa. So um, it's definitely an argument that will continue to go on as younger players are figuring out who these guys are, and honestly, like I'm sticking with Messi. I still believe he's been the best player for a long time.
Yeah, no, the last thing I will say on that is I honestly, I thought the discussion was over in 2014 at that World Cup because Lionel Messi, if you go back and if you watch those games, Lionel Messi pretty much single-handedly carried Argentina to the World Cup finals. And they couldn't win the game. They lost, of course, to Germany in extra time. But I had never seen in a team sport like soccer one player have such a large influence at the highest level. Like the World Cup is the highest level of international soccer, and for one guy to single-handedly do what he did, after watching that, sure they lost in the final, but after watching that, I was convinced that no other player could ever do what I just saw Messi do back in that 2014 tournament. And ever since then, I was convinced. And obviously, it's great to see him finally win something. I mean, my biggest, if I could change one sports result, in the history of sports, that's what my result would be. I'd have Argentina win the 2014 World Cup over Germany, just because Messi deserved it from that performance.
It's hard to disagree with you. Messi should have won in 2014, and the fact he didn't just kind of sucks. Like he could have had the World Cup as well. Man, that just would have just added on to that. So yeah, it's hard that people continue this debate, and they just it, people will continue to say Ronaldo's better, but I don't think they realize how good Messi really is. So hopefully people will realize that Messi is better.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of World Cup, we talked about, obviously Italy, England, Belgium, Portugal, France, Brazil, and Argentina next year are going to be ready for that World Cup as well. This Argentina, obviously, it's a 35-year-old Messi, so he's not going to be the same sort of single-handed dominant force that he would have been, say, at the previous World Cups. But I think Argentina have a very complete team around him, and they'll obviously be looking to do damage. And Brazil, as of right now, are actually the betting favorites for the 2022 World Cup. And you know that they'll be fueled by this loss to kind of like how England will have all that motivation. Brazil will have that motivation as well coming off of this second place finish at the Copa America. And speaking of some more soccer, before we get into some NHL talk, the Gold Cup, which is the North American Championships, have started. And I know I was talking last week about some of the important upcoming matchups. So just a reminder that this coming Sunday, which I believe is July the 18th, Canada versus USA in the Gold Cup. Both of those countries played their first games. Canada beat Martinique 4-1, and the United States beat Haiti 1-0 in their opening games. So both teams open up the tournament with a win. But some bad news for Canada. Alphonso Davies, who's easily Canada's best player, arguably the best player in North America right now. And I honestly don't think that that's arguable. I mean, I think you can pretty much say he is the best player in North America right now. He is missing the tournament. He injured his ankle in training, and he went back to Germany to rehab the injury at his club team, Bayern Munich. So it's a huge loss for Canada, which should hurt them going further on into the tournament.
That's a huge loss for Canada, Alphonso Davies. Like that's just someone you really cannot afford to lose, and they lost him now, and uh, it's gonna be an interesting few days for Canada.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting tournament because they're missing their two best players, Jonathan David and Alphonso Davies, and it'll be very interesting to see how they match up against some teams. And they play Haiti next in the group stage, and then they play the United States in the group stage, and these are two teams that they will play in World Cup qualifiers in the coming months ahead. And so it'll be a very good test to face these types of nations without their two best players to really see how they stack up. If Canada can beat Haiti and compete with the United States while missing these two key players, it will be a huge momentum boost for the team, knowing that, even without our two best players, we can compete. And for the United States, they were able to beat a Haiti team 1-0 with a very rotated lineup. None of their really star players were playing. Christian Pulisic, for example, was not did not play a part in the game, and so that's, speaking of confidence boosters, it is a confidence booster for, obviously, the United States didn't qualify for the last World Cup. It was a huge disappointment for them, and so for them to be able to beat a team like Haiti, who, like I said, they'll be competing with for those World Cup qualifying spots going forward, for them to win with a rotated squad is a big momentum boost for the United States as well. And for both Canada and the United States, it's also worth mentioning that Mexico, their best player, Hirving Lozano, he's going to be missing the tournament due to injury after he got hurt in their opening game, which was a tie, a 0-0 draw with Trinidad and Tobago. So, first of all, for Trinidad and Tobago, that's a huge accomplishment to get a tie against Mexico, so, fair play to them. But now for countries like Canada, United States, Costa Rica, Honduras, some of these other nations who really, think that maybe they can be competing to win this tournament, to see a team like Mexico prove that they're not invincible and that they can, be, well, I won't say beaten because they weren't beaten, they were tied, but to prove that Trinidad and Tobago can force them to a draw, in the United States, Canada, these countries are thinking, hey, maybe we do have a chance to win this tournament. Obviously, for those of you who aren't aware, there have been 15 CONCACAF Gold Cups. Mexico have won 8, USA have won 6, and Canada have won 1. And that is the only 3 teams to have ever won this tournament. So seeing a team like Mexico not win in convincing fashion at this tournament is something that doesn't happen very often.
No, absolutely not. And so it'll be interesting. Like injuries affect everybody, and we talk about it in every sport. Losing a key player to an injury can greatly affect the way the tournament plays out. So it'll be interesting to see these teams that have won it already adapt to the play of not having their best player.
Absolutely, and so that is something we will follow very closely. And next week we will have an update at the end, because next week will be the end of the group stage, and we can talk about, well, first of all, how the Canada USA game went and sort of what the quarterfinal matchups are looking like. But until then, that is it for some very lengthy soccer talk. But hey, when there are 3 major tournaments going on at the same time, you're bound to get a lot of talking points. But now we can pivot over to the NHL. And obviously, last week we were talking about Tampa Bay winning the Stanley Cup because it was ahead of Game 5. Obviously, they officially won that Game 5 and won the Stanley Cup. But since then, there have been a couple of storylines. So I'll just throw a bunch of stuff out for you and let you talk about any sort of points that you want to, or bring up your own. But I think some of the biggest storylines have been Vasilevsky winning the Conn Smythe, Nikita Kucherov's number one bullshit post conference and celebration, and the trade that just broke about an hour before recording. Duncan Keith, the rumors are true. He has officially been traded to the Edmonton Oilers.
And don't forget, Pierre Maguire is now the head of vice president of players something player.
Oh yeah, he got some role now with the Ottawa Senators.
Let me just pull it up real quick.
Oh, and
But
yeah,
yeah,
while you're looking it up, also, yeah, and at the ESPYs they gave Patrick Kane Best NHL Player Award, which makes 0 sense, but
which makes absolutely no sense. So Pierre Maguire with the Ottawa Senators is the senior vice president of player development, which is very interesting for that man. But hey, a job's a job, and good for him. Um, let's talk about all those other things that Nikita Kucherov making some awesome ass comments after the game. No, I don't want to go back to Montreal. They had their Stanley Cup already. And then his shirt saying $18 million over the cap while holding the Stanley Cup. And then the number one bullshit while signing a deal with Bud Light like hours after they won the cup. Same with Vasilevsky. Vasilevsky wearing the Conn Smythe like a hat. Like Tampa Bay is just it's Champa Bay right now. It's so fun to watch, and it's kind of cool that they're having the boat parade again, like the Buccaneers did, like and they did last year. I think that's a cool idea for Tampa Bay. That's unique to them. So, Nothing else to say about Tampa Bay. Congratulations. We knew they would win. Montreal put up a good fight, but obviously Tampa Bay was just Tampa Bay, and they were ridiculous. Um, yeah, the trade. Chicago fleeced the Oilers, bro. Like, this is another trade that Ken Holland shouldn't have made, and he still did. Like, Chicago is retaining absolutely zero of that salary while giving up Caleb Jones, who is already better than Duncan Keith the way he's playing right now, and a third rounder. Like, oh my god, this is just a stupid move by Edmonton. I don't know why they wanted to do this. I'd like your thoughts on the reasoning why you think they traded for Duncan Keith.
Yeah, I'll start with the Duncan Keith stuff. I don't get it. I really don't get it, and it doesn't really take a genius to not get it. Like, even if you were to explain the situation to someone who doesn't watch hockey, or explain the situation to someone who doesn't watch sports, they would be able to tell you that this is a bad idea. Like, if you just explain to someone the salary cap exists, so if players make more money, that takes away the ability to pay other players. And then explain that they just traded for a 38-year-old defenseman who has progressively gotten worse and worse the last few seasons, who, by the way, his cap hit is, what's his cap hit, 6.5 million? I
Yeah,
believe it's...
I think it's 5.5 to 6 million.
Yeah, it's not a cheap cap hit that they're having to take in. And so that's the thing, like, I don't understand. I don't know if Ken Holland is trying to make such a big brain play that, like, it did a 180. Like, he thinks it's such a stupid trade that it's like big brain in some way. Like, I don't get it. It doesn't. There's absolutely zero reason to trade for a guy who's turning 38 years old, is coming off of a very bad season from eye test, statistically, advanced analytics, like, from every perspective. He's coming off of a very bad year, and his salary is, it doesn't make any sense. $5.5 million is the AAV that they're going to be hit with. And we talk about the Oilers and trying to put a team around Connor McDavid. And here's another story that we didn't even think about. If you look at some of the players who are available this offseason, you have Dougie Hamilton. You have Jack Eichel demanding a trade. Now you have the new news of Vladimir Tarasenko demanding a trade. The Washington Capitals are actively shopping Evgeny Kuznetsov. I believe it's Evgeny Kuznetsov they're actively shopping.
Yeah, like...
And out of all of these tremendous players, sure, Hamilton's a free agent, so there's a lot of risk, and if you go all in on that, you might not get your man. Is he a restricted free agent, though?
I'm unsure, but, like, the overall point is this is just stupid.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Does Tarasenko have some question marks regarding his health, given that he's missed more time than he's played in the last 2 years because of his shoulder surgeries? Absolutely. There are a lot more question marks about Duncan Keith's ability to play hockey right now than Vladimir Tarasenko's, I'd think.
Oh yeah,
and I know they play different positions, but my point is like, if you look at all of this tremendous talent that's available to make moves towards to improve your hockey club, and I know that the Oilers' main concern is defense. So I know I might sound stupid saying, oh, Vladimir Tarasenko, oh, Evgeny Kuznetsov, oh, Jack Eichel, like, Labi, these are all forwards. What the fuck are you talking about? I get it. But my point is by trading for Duncan Keith, you're not improving your team. And if you want to give up pieces like Jones and third-round draft pick, at least do so to improve your team, even if it's in areas where you're already strong. You can always get stronger. It does make sense to me. Like you said, Caleb Jones right now can fill the role that they're going to ask Duncan Keith to play, and he can do it while making an AAV of $1 million. And the third-round draft pick on top of that makes no sense. It makes no sense to me. I really thought that Duncan Keith was going to be a player that Chicago would have to throw in. Like, you know how when the Leafs had to get rid of the Patrick Marleau contract, they had to include a first round pick to get rid of him.
Yeah.
I really thought that that's what the Chicago Blackhawks were going to have to do. And they, like you said, they absolutely fleeced Edmonton.
It looks really bad on Edmonton. Like Caleb Jones was gonna be a good defenseman. He was gonna, he just needed maybe 1 or 2 more years more of development, and he would have been there. He would have been exactly what they need. And you trade him to a Chicago team that is trying to get rid of Duncan Keith. And you're right, Duncan Keith is one of the three, maybe four players of that dynasty that helped them win a cup. But he's 38 years old for a team that's trying to help a guy that can skate faster than anyone in the league. What's a guy that's going to get outskated going to do for you? You need the young core. Like, look what Dubas did. He tried to get some young guys with some veterans, right? Like, which I totally understand, like Thornton, but he put them on like the fourth line as a grinder line. Duncan Keith's going to get like 30 minutes a game. How do you think he's going to withstand that the entire season? Especially in a division that's going back to normal, and there's going to be some good teams there. So it just boggles my mind that the Oilers made this stupid ass deal. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
The other thing is those types of players that you're mentioning, the Thorntons, the Wayne Simmons, the Spetzas, the Corey Perrys on Montreal, all of those players were acquired through free agency. They didn't give up anything to get them. And they were also given very cheap contracts. Thornton's making like $1 million. Wayne
Thornton's not
Simmons,
even making $1 million. It's
yeah,
950,000.
there you go. Like Spezza is literally on the veteran minimum salary. Like he's making the absolute like Spezza is making as little money as he could possibly make on a contract. Corey Perry, I believe, is also like making $1 million. Wayne Simmons' contract is 2 years at 1.5. So I get your like that's the like I understand having veteran presence, but like the thing that kills me is people talk about like this is gonna sound stupid, but like this is the point that I'm gonna make. Like people talk about how like games like NHL or like Madden or like what they're very unrealistic and like the trade logic is terrible in those games, which is true. But it's bad when like if anyone has NHL 21, go to franchise mode and try to trade away Duncan Keith. You won't be able to get a 7th round draft pick for Duncan Keith in the game because the game recognizes that contract is cancer. And so teams are like, oh, he's a good player, but like, no thank you. It's the same reason why Brent Seabrook is like can't ever get traded in the game. It's the same reason why Brent Burns and Vlasic on the Sharks aren't ever going to get traded. And like it's bad when the video game that can't get anything right gets something right, and Ken Holland can't even do as good. Like the virtual GM in NHL 21 would do a better job running the Edmonton Oilers than Ken Holland would right now. And I think that is like the worst criticism that you can give a real life general manager. Like it's bad when you're like, I trust EA Sports' AI more than I trust you.
Yeah, it's like he was great. He was great for what they needed 5-6 years ago. It's no longer 5-6 years ago. He's not the guy that he was. He's gonna get beat and he's gonna look really bad. And my bold take for the season is he's gonna be like a minus in the tens in the teams. Because it's Edmonton. They have one line of absolute dominance and then it kind of falls off. And with a goaltender Mike Smith coming back, and who knows what's happening with Koskinen. He's subpar. Um, you're gonna need strong defensemen, and getting rid of one of your younger guys for a guy who's about to retire. It it logically there's no logic there. It makes no sense to do what they did, and they did it anyways.
Yeah, it does not make sense because realistically, Duncan Keith might have a role on an NHL team right now on their third pairing. And even that might be a stretch.
Yeah.
But
Like,
as a third pairing guy, you don't want a third line defenseman making $5.5 million. You just don't.
and you don't want him to be like 38 years old.
Yeah, you just don't. There's a reason why, like as a Penguins fan, Mike Matheson's contract, Marcus Pettersson's contract, are problems for Penguins fans because they recognize not these aren't bad players. Like Marcus Pettersson has a spot on the Penguins roster. The problem is his spot is on the third D pairing and his contract is $5 million a year.
But at least
That
he's younger than Keith and knows how to play. Like,
Oh no, no, for sure, for sure. But my point is like, especially with this salary cap era, right? And especially with McDavid taking up $12.5 million of it, you can't afford to pay role players star money and assemble a winning team. Your fourth line guys, your third line D pairing can't be making $5 million. Like in the same way that Buffalo, good luck trading Jeff Skinner because you can't have a $9 million player on your fourth line or as a healthy scratch even at points, right? Like that is what makes these players terrible assets. Duncan Keith is a terrible asset because the amount of money that he takes up in the salary cap does not warrant the role that he can still play on a team. And like you said, at 38 years old, he's only going to regress more. And you talk about him being a minus player. The biggest knock on Duncan Keith, and even going back, like he was a phenomenal defenseman, obviously winning those 3 Stanley Cups in Chicago, but he was never the best skater, even in his prime. The game has gotten so much faster. He's going to get torched by players. He's going to get absolutely torched by players. Nathan McKinnon going down on Duncan Keith, it's not even a challenge. He's going to skate right past him without Duncan Keith is going to pivot and he's going to be gone.
yeah, and that's just going to show that Edmonton has made more strides backwards than forwards. Like, if I'm McDavid, I'd be pissed off at this. Like, sure, he's a good veteran guy, and he's won 3 cups, but 38 years old. Like, I'd be pretty pissed off about this.
Yeah, and like you said, they still have a lot of key issues to address. As like you mentioned, their goaltending. Well, there are a lot of decent goalies going into free agency.
Yeah,
Would
and
you
they
rather
should.
have would you rather have that $5 million going towards a Grubauer or a Freddie Anderson or
Yeah, Anderson would have been perfect for them. They think he's worth 5 mil. Duncan Keith's making 5.5. So there you go. There's your goaltender right there. You figured that out, but instead you get a 38-year-old goaltender, defenseman that has regressed significantly in the past 5 years.
Absolutely. If you were to poll Oilers fans, would you rather have Duncan Keith or would you rather have Caleb Jones and Freddie Anderson? I think I know what every single Oilers fan is picking.
Oh, absolutely, because Oilers fans can use common sense and realize their time is like now and not 5 years ago. Like they need to do something now and they need to make big noise now before they can even consider making it past the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah. And so, speaking of other trades and trade rumors, I know I briefly touched upon it, but what are your thoughts on the Vladimir Tarasenko asking to get traded news story, and where do you think a potential landing spot for him would be?
Well, Tarasenko was not happy with the way that the Blues organization dealt with his surgeries when he had them, which he's had, quite a few, as we know, you and I. He's very injury prone. So that's the reason why he wants out, and the Blues haven't really done anything for him aside the 2019 championship win. Um, a good fit for him I could see is a Canadian team. I think a fresh start in a different country would be good for him. I think if he went to a team like maybe Vancouver or a team like well, I was gonna say Edmonton, but Edmonton seems they have made their mind up. Or Calgary even, because I think that Goudreau, the core of Goudreau, Monahan, and obviously Bennett's gone, and Giordano is kind of reached its late age, so maybe they have maybe 1 or 2 more years left of we have a shot at this. So bring in Tarasenko and give them some extra some extra, life to that team before they eventually are going to have to blow that team up. So I don't think Tarasenko is going to. Obviously, I don't think he's going to stay with the Blues. I don't think he'll be a Blue next season. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually crazy that you mentioned Calgary because that's what I was thinking as well. Well, I actually have a couple of thoughts. I think that best case scenario, St. Louis is going to want to trade them to a team like Calgary where you can get that player in return. And like you said, you talk about that core. I think St. Louis would be looking at a team like Calgary because they're looking like Calgary's a team that there's a lot of rumors about trading star players. And if you can try to get a Kachuk type of player, for example, in return for Tarasenko, that would be a phenomenal piece of. Is it still Doug Armstrong in St. Louis?
No, he went to Arizona, I believe.
Did he? Oh well, whoever's in charge of whoever's the GM of St. Louis right now. Um, you mentioned those shoulder surgeries. For those of you who don't know the story, it's actually pretty crazy. Um, Basically, like you said, he's unhappy with the way they handled his injury. Apparently, the story is when the St. Louis team doctors did his shoulder surgery the first time, they didn't actually fix the problem that was in his shoulder. And it wasn't until he went to an independent doctor that they were able to basically go through a scan and realize you do realize they never fixed your injury. So I understand why he wants out of St. Louis. Like, you know how like incompetent you have to be as a medical staff to your star player comes to you and says I have a shoulder injury and you're like okay we'll go into surgery and your surgery doesn't fix the injury that he has, which leads me to believe two things. Is he actually properly injury prone or did he just have an injury that was never properly healed because it was never properly treated? And so if I'm a team, I honestly think you can use the fact that he's demanded a trade and the fact that he's injury prone, or so to speak, injury prone, as an excuse to potentially try to lowball an offer. Because I think Tarasenko, like I think you could really, I think a team would be willing to take a bet on him not actually being injury prone, and it's actually just he had one injury that was just not properly dealt with for 3 years, which honestly might signs point to that could be the case. He's shown that he can be a 40 goal scorer. I think that if you're St. Louis, you want to try to get a star piece in return, which is why you would look to a Calgary potentially for like a Kachuk or like get a star player like that. But if I'm a general manager, I'm talking to St. Louis, I'm getting on the phone, and I'm lowballing the fuck out of that. And
Yeah.
I'm using every excuse. Oh, the expansion draft's in 9 days. You don't want to waste a pick protecting Tarasenko. So you should just trade him now. That way you can protect another player in the lineup that you don't want to lose. So, like, realistically, you only have 9 days to trade him. And the guy's super injury prone anyways. And, like, he has a big cap hit. So, I'm doing you a favor by getting him off your hands if you really think. Like, that's what I'm on the phone and that's what I'm laying it on thick. And I'm trying to lowball and get him to my team. Because I think that if you can get a guy like Tarasenko without giving up a lot, it's kind of like that Taylor Hall trade. The Bruins got Taylor Hall for a second round pick essentially, and that's such a low level of return where that's a risk that I'm willing to take as a franchise. If I can get Tarasenko without giving up a first rounder, a prominent top 6 player, or a top prospect, that's a risk I'm willing to take.
Yeah, the Blues really screwed up here, big time because now they seem incompetent and they seem like their organization doesn't give a shit about its star players. Um, Tarasenko has been obviously the franchise staple of that team, being there since he was drafted. So, if I'm St. Louis, you got to take what's given to you. Like yeah, like you said, there could have been first rounders. There could have been, involved in trade, but with his knowledge of the Blues not really taking care of him and not really, that's going to really lower the value. And I don't know. I could see him ending up on a team like Calgary or Vancouver even, but he'll probably stay in the States just because it's closer to St. Louis. But it's gonna be interesting to see where he goes for sure.
The other, also two quick points. Another reason he's frustrated with St. Louis management is he was snubbed as the captain of. Obviously, they picked Ryan O'Reilly as captain over him, which apparently really pissed him off. Which, as you mentioned, drafted by the organization, been in the organization his whole career. Obviously, Ryan O'Reilly joined the organization in 2019, so I can see why he would be frustrated at not getting picked for captain. And also, going back to my point about lowballing, and like you said, this Blues don't really have a lot of power. He also has a modified no trade clause, so I believe he can pick a list of 10 teams that he's willing to get traded to, which further limits the amount of control St. Louis has. So if I'm a GM and I'm one of the 10 teams on that list, that's my like immediate thing. Look, the expansion draft's in 9 days. I know you don't want to waste a protection spot on protecting him, so you want to get this trade done before then. You can only talk to me and 9 other guys. He wants to leave, so you have to trade him. I don't see how St. Louis can get a good trade off because, like, if St. Louis can get good value back, that will be so surprising to me. Like, I can see Tarasenko getting traded for next to nothing.
Which would really suck because he's worth it. He's a good player, and it sucks that he's injury prone. But I don't think he's really as injury prone as people think. I think the Blues just handle it poorly.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
absolutely.
you're right. Like he's only got 10 teams to talk to, so you either talk to me or 9 guys, or boom, he's gone to the expansion draft. Take and you get nothing in return. Make your mind up and decide what you want to do. Do you want something in return or do you want nothing? Like that's what it's going to come down to. I think GMs of those 10 teams that he wants are really going to have leverage against them against the Blues.
Or hear me out. To be honest, I don't even know if this is illegal, like if this is allowed to be done. But you know how teams made trades with Vegas to ensure that they would take certain players?
Yes.
What if they do the reverse? If I'm Seattle, I'm getting on. If I'm allowed to, once again, I have no idea if they're allowed to do this or not. But assuming they're allowed to do this, if I'm Seattle, I'm getting on the phone with St. Louis and I'm saying, "Look, I'll give you a third round pick to not protect Tarasenko, to leave Tarasenko exposed. It's like you're trading him. I'll give you a third round pick to leave him exposed so I can take him in the expansion draft. Because let's be real, are you going to get much better from a trade offer? If I'm Seattle, once again, I have no idea if they're allowed to do this. But if they're allowed to do that, if I'm Seattle, I'm trying to figure that out.
Right. Um, that is interesting. I never thought of that. Um, it's 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 something to think about for sure. Do you think St. Louis would really do that though? Like that seems like sleazy kind of.
Yeah, well, because the reality is, if this trade doesn't get done in the next 9 days, and they have to submit their, which I say that as if I'm pretty sure the deadline to protect players is sooner than that. So they
It's
realistically only have
yeah.
a couple of days to trade him before they have to submit their protection list. And we all know that if the Tarasenko trade doesn't happen, Tarasenko is getting protected. Like they're not going to lose Tarasenko to Seattle for nothing. Like Tarasenko is going to get protected if this drags on that long. Um, so that's why I say that because if I'm Seattle, I'm using that. Like I'm gonna once again, I don't know if they're allowed to do this, but that conversation works. It's like, look, I know you're gonna have to protect him, but you also would much rather protect another player instead. What will it take to leave him exposed?
Yeah. And that would be a trade probably. I assume a trade like that would not be like a very big major trade because I don't know how much attention they really want to bring to something like that, but I don't know why that wouldn't be illegal. I mean, it's they're still making a trade. I think. I don't
That
know.
I'd imagine it would be because you saw it happen the other. Like for example, Pittsburgh gave a second round pick to Vegas, on the guarantee that Vegas would pick Fleury because Jake Gensel or Brian Rust, one of those two players, I think it was Brian Rust, was left exposed because of what the players that we had. And so they were like, well, we want to keep Brian Rust because he's a good young sniper. So in order to ensure that you pick Fleury, we'll give you a second rounder. And a bunch of teams did that. I actually believe it was, I think Anaheim traded away. Oh my God, who's that defenseman now? Who's an absolute stud
Brandon
for?
Montour,
No, not Brand. Oh,
Shea
I can't.
Theodore.
Yeah, I think it was Shea Theodore. I honestly think Anaheim traded Shea Theodore to ensure that Vegas wouldn't pick another one of their players, which obviously turned out terribly for them. So we've seen those types of trades happen. So it would be very interesting for Seattle to, pull a reverse Uno card and make trades the opposite way to ensure that some players get left exposed. And, obviously in our next podcast, I think by that time, the protection list will be out, and maybe we'll do a mock expansion of who we would pick if we were Seattle, or talk about certain players, because some players, some interesting names, I think, are really going to be left exposed. Like one name that's being thrown around a lot, as you mentioned, Calgary, is Mark Giordano. With his age and his cap hit, there are rumors around Calgary saying that they're going to leave Giordano exposed because they don't believe that Seattle will pick the 38-year-old, I believe he is, who's making a lot of money. Sound familiar, Oilers? It's like the rest of the league realizes that that's maybe not the best decision to make. Although obviously with Giordano being their captain, that complicates things. But it's definitely an interesting game, this whole expansion thing.
And that's the fun of it is are you gonna get in someone's head and make them make a mental mistake, and now you have a great player on your team um that you didn't expect to have because, well, they didn't think they'd give it up, but who knows?
Exactly. Who knows for sure? For those of you who aren't aware, the expansion draft is taking place on July the 21st. Seattle will pick one player from every team except for Vegas, who are exempt as the most recent expansion team, which is bullshit, but that's a whole other discussion. Teams have two options for protecting players, either 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and a goalie, or any 8 skaters and a goalie. So obviously the rationale there is if you want to protect 4 defensemen, then you'll have to only be able to protect 8 skaters, or you can protect 10, but they have to be 7 forwards and 3 defensemen, which is what I believe most teams will go with, because obviously you want to protect more players than not. And then here's the other interesting thing. Seattle have an exclusive window between July 18th and 21st to interview and sign any pending free agents who are left unprotected. Meaning that teams, like players who are upcoming expiring free agents, I'll just use an example, say Freddie Anderson, just because I know he's a free agent. Which obviously completely unrealistic, probably not going to happen. But let's say Toronto, I'd imagine the goalie that Toronto will protect will be Jack Campbell, which would leave Freddie Anderson exposed. The Kraken would be able to interview and sign Freddie Anderson to an extension and then draft him, knowing that he's not an upcoming free agent, and they would have the new contract that they signed, which I believe makes things even more interesting, because it gives Seattle an opportunity to potentially snap up some potential free agents who obviously will then not be free agents.
That is a very interesting thing. I had no idea about that, but yeah, that could definitely change the way this expansion draft looks for sure.
Yeah, and we will, of course, be right there next episode to walk through a lot more details. Honestly, with all the soccer slowly getting out of the way, I think that will be one of the main topics. But pivoting to the other main topic of probably next week's podcast, but we do want to briefly mention it today as well, is the NBA Finals are underway. The Phoenix Suns with a 2-1 lead over the Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee winning the last game to really keep the series competitive, because we all know 3-0 series is a series that's over. Giannis, playing on an injured knee, has just been absolutely tearing it up. but it doesn't look like it's enough to stop Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and the Phoenix Suns. Have you been watching the games, and what are your thoughts on the finals so far?
Oh man, Giannis is ridiculous. 41 points back to back. First time since I believe LeBron did it a few years ago. Um, he's oh man, he's putting the team on his back. Like it's not just his knee, it's his back from carrying that team. Uh, like I don't think it'll be enough because I think the Suns as a team have better chemistry and it just Giannis is doing everything. He legitimately is doing everything he possibly can to keep this team in the finals and good for him. Like he'll go down as probably the greatest Buck, if not one of the greatest Bucks that ever played. That may not have won a championship, but it's been fun to watch for sure. I've watched every game so far. They've been pretty good games to watch. Phoenix has looked pretty dominant, and Milwaukee obviously. Giannis is probably the best player to watch so far in these finals, but I still believe Phoenix is going to have what it takes. They'll probably win Game 4, go home and win in front of the fans in Game 5.
Yeah, I mean, we all knew Giannis going into the arena in Game 3 with those black Air Force Ones.
Oh yeah, it
We all
was
knew the
game
Bucks were
over.
winning that game.
Yeah, it.
Yeah, no, like you said, what Giannis has done, especially Game 2 and Game 3 with back-to-back 40-plus point games, that's great. That there is a very short list of players that have scored 40 points in the finals, let alone an even shorter list of players who have scored 40 points in back-to-back finals games. You're talking about all-time great players. Um, it sucks that right now it looks like it's going to still be not enough. But I think that when Giannis signed that contract extension in Milwaukee, a lot of people were very dismissive of it, saying, "Oh, well, he's just signing away 5 years of not being able to compete for a title." And this year especially, he's had his struggles, and a lot of people were like, how is this guy back-to-back MVP? He's not a top 3 player in the league. He is showing right now that he is as great as everyone was saying, and that he deserves to be this two-time MVP, one of the best players in the league. He's really showing that right now. That knee, I don't know how he's playing right now. Like his knee was bent the other direction. It's ridiculous what he's definitely playing through some sort of injury. Obviously, I'm sure after the series is over, we'll get a lot more details about what a lot more specific details about that injury. But I mean, he's absolutely balling. On the other hand, I can't really get mad at this Phoenix Suns team. Is just it's phenomenal what they've been able to do. And I know we talked about last week about like this was a Phoenix Suns organization that was doing absolutely nothing, and now flash forward and for Chris Paul to win a ring, that would be huge. For Devin Booker, obviously, to finally have some kind of success after the way the guy's been absolutely just balling and no one's really been paying attention the last couple of years. It's great to see. It's great to see on both sides. It's great to see that Giannis can sign for a franchise like Milwaukee and they can compete. And it's also great to see a team like the Phoenix Suns also compete for a ring. Like you said, I think if Game 4 goes to Phoenix and it's a 3-1 series lead, the series is over. But the series isn't over until you lose at home. There's a lot of pressure on the Bucks, especially going down 2-0 to go back to Milwaukee and win both games. They got the job done in Game 3. It'll be very interesting to see if they get the job done in Game 4. If this series gets tied 2-2, I think that completely changes the course of this series. But like you said, Giannis is really on his own. I mean, Drew Holiday has really fallen off in this finals. The supporting cast for Milwaukee just haven't been good enough so far. If they can figure it out, I think they can definitely get back in this series. But I agree with you right now. It does look like the Phoenix Suns are looking more likely.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a good way to wrap it up. Is I think Phoenix Suns. I think Chris Paul finally gets his ring, and Devin Booker is the next franchise player for the Phoenix Suns.
Absolutely. And like I said, next week we'll be back to talk a lot of expansion draft scenarios with hockey. Once again, we'll give you a Gold Cup update in soccer and an NBA Finals update. And by then, will we have a new NBA champion? We just might. But until then, this has been another episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.